Jim Walsh keeps it live and local weekday mornings on SuperTalk 1270.
Okay, question for you. How far do we want to go in giving a guy a break, a free pass, because he's a veteran? We've got a fellow in Montana, Senator John Walsh, no relation. He's running for re-election. Actually, he's running for election. And the campaign has gone into defensive mode because it came out that his master's degree thesis contained plagiarized passages. And now his excuse, he's a veteran, and he says he blames his plagiarism on post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the question is, do we cut him a break on this? 663-1270, 663-1270. Love to hear from you. Love to get your comments. Jim Walsh, that would be me, on SuperTalk 1270 and SuperTalk1270.com. Montana Senator running for re-election suggested this week that the medication he took for PTSD, i.e. battle fatigue, what are some of the other things they've called it over the years? George Carlin did a whole thing about that. It started with shell shock. In World War I, it was called shell shock. And then it became battle fatigue in World War II. And then by the time we got to Korea, operational exhaustion. Finally, Vietnam and beyond, it became post-traumatic stress disorder. And as Mr. Carlin said, they probably would be better off if they were still calling it shell shock. Maybe a lot of those veterans would be more likely to get the kind of health care they need if they were calling it that, rather than something cold and technical like post-traumatic stress disorder. Was it 8 syllables and a hyphen there? Totally squeezed all the humanity right out of it. But anyway, the issue at hand here, Montana Senator John Walsh, actually, he was appointed senator, so he's running for election, not necessarily re-election, technicality there. But he says he was dealing with the stress of a fellow veteran's recent suicide. Now, I have a little bit of experience in this area myself. I'm not a veteran, but I did go to school. I went back to school very recently, relatively late in life. I'm 58 years old now. I would never lie about my age. I'm 58 now. I'll be 59 in January. And just a few weeks ago, I got my bachelor's degree, my first and presumably only bachelor's degree in life. It only took me about 30 some odd screech years to get it. First time I went to college as a very young man, I was not ready for it. Shouldn't have gone, should have waited. And as it turned out, I went back a few years ago and I got my degree. And I can tell you firsthand, first of all, something you got to know about graduate school. A big part of graduate school, as I'm learning right now firsthand, is in turning you into an academic, getting you to paraphrase the paper chase, they want you to think like a professor. Not like a lawyer, but like a professor. They're teaching you, mostly graduate school is learning how to write papers. That, I think, in a nutshell, is what it's all about. And I'm working on my master's degree right now, and that's the crux of it for me, is they teach you how to write papers. They teach you how to play the academic game. And I don't mean that in any kind of negative way necessarily. That's not meant to be disparaging. It's not meant to belittle the whole experience. But that's the way things are done. So if you have trouble with a paper because you're plagiarizing, doesn't that kind of defeat the whole purpose of being in graduate school? And I'm sure there are plenty of guys out there who are probably in the same situation that Mr. Walsh was in terms of Army experience, war experience, who went through the same kind of thing and they managed to pull it off. But my question is to you here, and I would like to get your thoughts on this. Should we cut the guy a break, given that he's a veteran, given that he is he got his master's degree from the U.S. Army War College, but he was a veteran. He obviously saw a lot of things, man. He saw a lot. Okay. You know what I'm trying to say. He was a veteran over there. He had the war experience. He also had the experience of his friend committing suicide. Now, that's interesting to me because when I first went back to school, right about the time, I had a very close friend, one of my first girlfriends, actually, who died very suddenly. And it threw me for a loop completely. I was a basket case for months. My wife, my own family could tell you all about it. But the point was, I was going to school at the time. I found a way to work through it. If I can do that, I think anybody can. So, again, the question is, should this Democratic Senate, well, let's leave the party affiliation out of it. It doesn't really matter what letter he's got next to his name. It really doesn't. The question is, should this guy get a free pass because of his military experience, his PTSD, so to speak? That is the question here. At 663-1270, a spokesman for Walsh's campaign says the apparent plagiarism was unintentional. Well, again, that's something they teach you about in grad school. They teach you how to avoid plagiarizing intentionally or otherwise. And nobody's perfect. Sometimes your guard gets down. Sometimes there are pressures. You make mistakes. But what I'm saying is this. There are a lot of guys in the same situation who wouldn't get the pass because they don't have the post-traumatic thing to fall back on. If they're expected to do it, should we not expect this fellow, Mr. Walsh, to do the same thing? Should he really get a pass just because of the issues in his military background? I want to talk about this in some more detail in just a few minutes. I will read one comment here. A spokesman for his senatorial campaign committee. The committee stands by Walsh. John Walsh is a decorated. By the way, this is not the John Walsh from TV. This is not the guy, the guy on Fox TV, and he's got the new show. It's a different guy. And neither of them are related to me, all right? Anyway, the quote here from the campaign committee, John Walsh is a decorated war hero, and it's disgusting that his opponents are going to try to denigrate his distinguished service after multiple polls show him gaining. And he mentions the opponents again and says they should immediately denounce these latest smears and call for an end to all attacks on his record protecting Montana and serving his country. So let me put it to you. And please, I'm asking you on bended knee, keep the partisan politics out of it. It really doesn't matter what party he belongs to. It really doesn't. I'm not saying, would you give him a break if he was a Republican? No, it doesn't matter. R or D or I or E-I-E-I-O. What would that be? That'd be, I guess, the farm party. I don't know, the Farmville party, right? Whatever the case may be, should the guy get a pass? Should we let him off the hook? Because he says it's a question of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's why I accidentally plagiarized on my master's thesis. That's the question. 663-1270. Your comments welcome also on the website, supertalk1270.com. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270. With more conversation, your calls coming up.
Plagiarize. Plagiarize. Let no one else's work evade your eyes. Remember why the good Lord made your eyes, so don't shade your eyes, but plagiarize, plagiarize, plagiarize. Only be sure always to call it, please, research.
Thank you, Professor Tom Lehrer, for that lesson in plagiarism. All right. Montana Senator John Walsh not the Fox guy, and he's not related to me in any way. I think he might be. You know, I figure all the Walshes, if you go back far enough, little County Cork in Ireland somewhere, they probably are all related, but he doesn't look anything like me, I'll tell you that. Montana Senator John Walsh, running for re-election, suggested this week that the medication he took for post-traumatic stress disorder after service in Iraq may have been responsible for apparently plagiarized passages in his master's thesis. My question is, assuming all that's true, should we cut him a break on it? All the guys who go through something similar, who have managed to pull it off, is it not a kind of a slap in the face to them that we let one guy off the hook? That's what I'm saying. Certainly not to belittle his service, but just to say, if other guys have pulled it off under the same circumstances, why shouldn't he be expected to do so? Because let me tell you, and I can tell you firsthand, let me give you the number here, 663-1270, 663-1270. I can tell you firsthand, grad school, they go to great lengths to teach you how not to plagiarize accidentally or otherwise. How not to let no one else's work evade your eyes because you're trying to forget why the good Lord made your eyes. So don't shade your eyes, but whatever you do, don't plagiarize, and try to pass it off by calling it research. I'm on kind of a Tom Lehrer jag here all of a sudden. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270, supertalk1270.com. Senator Walsh also said he was dealing with the stress of a fellow veteran's recent suicide. Again, I was an undergraduate at the time, but a very, very close dear friend of mine died very suddenly. This was only about 3 years ago. And I was out of it for months. I was a basket case. But I did manage to pull off acing all my courses. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that you learn how to deal with things in life. It's part of being an adult. You learn how to work through crises like that because you're not always going to be able to do what you got to do under the most comfortable of circumstances. There are going to be crises in your life, but you have a job to do. You learn how to do the job despite the crises. It's certainly part of being a politician, or it should be. So, should we cut the guy a break on this? That's the question. 663-1270, 663-1270. Senator John Walsh, and there was some question about whether it's an election or re-election. He was actually appointed. His predecessor, Max Baucus, he quit to become the U.S. ambassador to China. So John Walsh, he got appointed to the position. And now they've gone into siege mode, defensive mode, because it came out that his master's degree, thesis, contained plagiarized passages. And I'm telling you, in grad school, they bend over backwards to teach you how not to let that happen. I would say, realistically, that is probably the big thing about grad school, is they teach you how to think like an academic. Like in law school, they teach you to think like a lawyer. Well, in grad school, they teach you how to think like an academic. And one of the big things, the big thing they teach you is how to do research. How not to plagiarize, but to do legitimate research. As a matter of fact, a lot of colleges, I know for a fact, the University of Mary has this. When you get ready to submit a paper, before you submit the paper in grad school, they actually have a function on one of their website pages that you can run it through, and it will tell you basically what it is. It has a huge, giant database of papers. And it will run your paper through the database, comparing it to all the other papers to see if there's any shady, suspicious resemblance in any of the wording. And it will come back with a percentage number, and anything over a certain percentage number, basically, it means you have to go back and rewrite it and recite it so it's more original. You know, it's more like, let's say, I think on one paper I got like a 17%, which was below the threshold. But again, it's not perfect. Okay, nobody's perfect. But above a certain percentage, if your paper bears too much of a resemblance to other papers that have been written on the given subject, then they tell you, they spit it back to you, and they tell you got to rewrite this, you got to do something to fix this problem. So the resources are available to anybody who wants them, anybody who's willing to use them. Because, yeah, there is such a thing as accidental plagiarization, whatever. But they account for that, and they give you ways to work around that. They give you the tools. So, again, I ask you, okay, this guy was a veteran. He served in the war. He served in Iraq. He had issues. He came home he was diagnosed with PTSD, shell shock, as the old veterans from previous wars used to call it. In my opinion, they should still call it that. Call it what it is, you know. Maybe more guys would be getting the kind of care they needed if we didn't hide it behind such fancy Orwellian terminology. Oh, he's got post-traumatic stress disorder, operational exhaustion, battle fatigue. No, it's shell shock. Call it shell shock. Because that's what it is. And maybe if we still called it shell shock, well, I know, beating a dead horse there, unfortunately. But the question is, okay, he said it was unintentional. Is that an adequate explanation? I ask you rhetorically, is there ever an excuse for ripping off someone else's work and passing it off as your own? Does stress cause that? Or is it an issue of ethics and morality? Or just being really tired and you kind of rationalize and you cut corners, you know what I mean? That happens too. But that, again, is not excusable. They have their standards. Shouldn't John Walsh be expected to adhere to the standards set in the academic community? Sounds reasonable to me. And it has nothing to do with the guy's political affiliation. I would say the same exact thing because, as you know, I don't think there is any real practical difference between the two so-called major parties. You know, it's Tweedledee and Tweedlevery-Dumb. In this case, it's Tweedledee. So, what are you going to do? That's the question. And again, the number is 663-1270. We have a lot of fun on this show, but I really like when folks weigh in. I really like to hear your opinions on these topics. It just works so much better that way. It's kind of what the show is all about. Now, some other things I want to talk about in the coming half hour here. The Tony Dungy thing, the whole thing where he said he wouldn't have hired Michael Sam because he's gay and I wouldn't want to go through all that hassle, blah, 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 blah. Well, the Tony Dungy thing is kind of fading back into the woodwork or back into the closet, if you will, where it belongs. And now the New York Giants have managed to draw the ire of all people, the Human Rights Campaign, for hiring David Tyree as Director of Player Development. Tyree, if you'll recall, from the whole helmet catch incident a few years ago, is anti-gay marriage. And he thinks you aren't born gay and that you can be converted. You can be de-gayified or whatever. And the question there is, should those views qualify one from a job evaluating others? I would contend, yeah, actually, they should. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. But actually, there's a couple of stories like that have been going on this week in the wide, wide world of sports. Our own Minnesota Vikings, the special teams coordinator, Mike Priefer, got suspended for comments he made regarding gay people and lesbians. He also plans to give $100,000 to gay and lesbian rights organizations. And again, the question is, of course, all the anti-gay people come right out of the woodwork, so to speak. They come out of their closet. And they say, well, they're making a victim out of this poor guy. Yeah, he's a victim. I remember what happened to poor old Bull Connor back in the 50s. They should stop picking on that guy. They should leave him alone. Just a poor guy tried to do his job with his fire hoses and his police dogs. Yeah, same kind of deal. But, yeah, I think it's an issue. And I'll tell you why. Well, let's sit on that for a couple of minutes because it's time to pay some bills. And I'll tell you more about that in a couple of seconds here. Yes, it's called the tease, a time-honored programming tactic in the wide world of radio broadcasting. Ain't I sneaky? Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270 and SuperTalk1270.com. More conversation, your calls coming up.
Backfield in motion, yeah. I'm gonna have to penalize you. Backfield in motion, baby. You know that's against the rules.
As the Tony Dungy flap begins to fade away, the New York Giants managed to draw the ire of the Human Rights Campaign, of all people, for hiring David Tyree as Director of Player Development. Tyree, if you recall, is anti-gay. You know, that whole helmet catch thing? Well, Tyree is anti-gay marriage, and he thinks you aren't born gay and can be converted. Well, here's the question. Should those views qualify one from a job evaluating others? I say actually, yeah. 663-1270, 663-1270. Why do I say that? Well, I think it is a pretty major issue if you're talking about a talent developer giving short shrift to an otherwise talented player just because he happens to be gay. I mean, the people have spoken on this issue. The people, by and large, I mean, there's always that very vocal minority. But the people, by and large, have made it clear that they don't really care. They don't care about what a guy does in the bedroom. All they care is about getting a winning team. Guy's a good player, and he helps the team win games. He helps them put W's up there on the scoreboard, puts points on the scoreboard. That's what people care about. Remember what happened to Tim Tebow? And I said this. I remember when Tebow went to New York, I said, Mr. Tebow is in for a big surprise because all his religious piety, and I don't care that he is religious, that's his business, but all that piety is not going to mean a hill of beans when he gets into the Big Apple. All they care, he could worship a pile of gazelle bones every day for all they care. But what they do care about is whether the guy is going to win football games. And if he doesn't, they'll say, all right, get that guy out of here, bring on the next guy. That's the way it works in the wide, wide world of sports. And a related story with the Vikings. Vikings suspending Mike Priefer, the special teams coordinator, suspended for 3 games, and he plans to donate $100,000 to gay and lesbian rights organizations after Chris Cluey, the punter, alleged that Mr. Priefer made some inappropriate comments while he was with the team. And the question is, some people seem to think this is not fair, that they're ganging up on Mr. Priefer like this. They're all over his, I was going to make a very bad, very lame joke there, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Get off his, case. And the question is, should they disqualify you from a job where you're involved in evaluating talent? Now, in the case of coordinating special teams, I think it's not exactly the same, but again, those views come into play. Are you going to not put a guy into the game where you should because you've got a problem with the guy's lifestyle? Potentially, yeah, you're damn right it's an issue. You better believe it is. Number 663-1270, 663-1270. Back to the Vikings story here. Mike Priefer will also be required by the team to undergo anti-harassment, diversity, and sexual orientation and sensitivity training. I don't know that all that is necessary. I just want to hear the guy say, no, I'm not going to let it be an issue. Okay? Yeah, all the reprogramming, that may be a bit much. But I definitely do want to hear him say, yeah, I'm going to look at the guy and I'm going to determine where he belongs in the scheme of things based on his skills as a player. And what he does at home is I may have feelings on it, but it's really of no concern of mine. That's what I want to hear him say. Has he said that, in effect? Well, he did say he was sorry he said what he said. And he is going to give money to these gay organizations. I'm sure he was strongly advised to do so. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And that's fine. But again, it's a response to the demands of the public by and large. And I'm fine with that. Because, yeah, it is an issue. It is an issue that he could be sacrificing the best interest of the team because he's got issues with somebody's personal life. Damn right it's an issue. All right. 663-1270. Oh, we should get Bruiser LaRue in for some commentary on that issue. Remember Bruiser LaRue of the Steubenville Studs? We'll get to that. The other thing we were talking about the David Tyree and, of course, the Tony Dungy thing. That happened earlier this week, and others, Olbermann and many others, have had things to say on that issue. The other thing we've been talking about this hour, and I think it's a pretty good topic because I have some personal experience in this area. We have a fellow running for senator in Montana named John Walsh. He was appointed to the position after his predecessor resigned to take a federal job, specifically ambassador to China. Pretty good gig, I would think. And this new Montana senator, his name is John Walsh, not the Fox guy. He's not my brother or my cousin or anything. I've never met the guy. But he's running for election, and it came out that he had done some plagiarizing on his master's thesis, which in academic terms is a pretty big deal. And he blames it on post-traumatic stress disorder. And my question to you is, do you think the guy should get a pass? Do you feel like we should give him a pass anyway, based on the sacrifice he made in his military service? That's the question. And the number is 663-1270. My name is Jim Walsh. This is SuperTalk 1270. Couple things going on this weekend you should know about. We have the North Dakota State Fair. Things are kind of winding down, but got a couple more concerts over the weekend. As we like to say, the best is yet to come as they wind down at the State Fair. I noticed, though, the attendance in the State Fair is off this year. We had a story on that on the website earlier this week, and you got to wonder why that's happening. My guess would be, and this is strictly an educated guess on my part, as the economy gets better for people, and it's certainly better than it was this time a few years ago, I think what's happening is just maybe it's the fact that more people are going out of state and taking their vacations elsewhere, going to wherever, Yellowstone, get ready to go to Sturgis or maybe to California or to the East Coast or wherever people go for vacations when they go. Everybody has their own vacation dream site. And now that the economy is on the upswing, although I would question just how good things are even here, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. The point is, there are a lot of people who are better off, and these people have tended to go back to their old ways and habits, which involves traveling to faraway places with strange-sounding names, instead of just staying in North Dakota and going to the State Fair for their big summer activity. I'm not saying it's a mixed blessing, I suppose. All right. Moving onward and upward. Nowhere to go but up. Another one of these Morality in Media group. In fact, that's the name of the group. Morality in Media. They've got their panties in a wad, so to speak, about the first trailer of the movie version of 50 Shades of Grey. What, the Westboro Baptist Church wasn't available? I mean, come on. You got these hardcore moralists. Yeah, they got a different perspective on things. But the first trailer for 50 Shades of Grey, it came out last couple of days. And how do they respond? Issuing dire warnings against the yet unscreened movie. Dire warnings. Let me find it here. Yes, they're condemning the trailer. Here we go. A warning to women lining up to see this film. There is nothing empowering about whips and chains or humiliation and torture. Women as a group will not gain power by collaborating with violent men. Women would be serving only as an agent to further their own sexual degradation, handing themselves on a silver platter to exactly the sort of men who want to use and abuse them and take away their power. It's a GD book, all right? It's a damn book. It's fantasy. It's a book for consenting adults who want to explore a fantasy. What is so hard about that? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? They might try a couple of things they read about in the book. Well, we're talking consenting adults here. So what? The trailer, they say, deceives the public with a visually appealing melodramatic love story that romanticizes and normalizes sexual violence. I got news for you. This kinky stuff is a lot more normal than a lot of people care to admit. It's out there. A lot of people do this stuff. Again, it's no big deal. It's all fantasy fulfillment. And in the morning, we all get dressed and go back to work, and everything is kosher like it should be. Mommy porn. I love that title. Mommy porn book. Yeah, I mean, it's pornography for women, basically. Which is different, by the way, in nature of pornography for men. But this whole argument came up when this book was published. The story centers around sexy millionaire Christian Grey, who is into all kinds of stuff, with a college grad named Anastasia Steele. And it's nothing new, of course. We had, a couple of years ago, we had the Marquis de Sade. I'll have to dig that out sometime. I've got this great comedic monologue by a guy named Lord Buckley, where he does kind of a beatnik rap all about the bad rapping of the Marquis de Sade. The Marquis de Sade, he walked in the door and he said, "I'm the baddest cat in this room, baby." But just leave it alone, okay? All right. It's just a book. It's just fantasy. Just consenting adults having a little fun inside their own damn heads. What's wrong with that? Number here is 663-1270. 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. More conversation, more of your calls coming up.
Another great moment in sports.
See, that's what you're going to miss if you let the David Tyrees have their way. That's something we can look forward to. All right. Super Talk 1270, Jim Walsh, supertalk1270.com. And we've been talking about the whole flap with David Tyree. And, of course, there's that, what's his name, the guy with the Minnesota, I keep saying the Minnesota Twins. What's the matter? It's Friday, I know. The Vikings, special teams coordinator Mike Priefer. And they both are accused of, it's pretty well known that they don't like them gay people. And there was some question as to whether that really has an impact on their ability to do their jobs. And my contention is, yeah, it kind of sort of does. It's a pretty major issue if you're talking about somebody like a talent developer or a coordinator passing on a talented player just because he may be gay. Yeah, it's a big issue. 663-1270. Jim Walsh, Super Talk 1270. And we have the anti-porn group, Morality in Media. One of these. What's the other one? Focus on the Families, another one. And then there's Brent Buzzell, nephew of Bill Buckley and his gang of blue noses. And it's probably just like one guy and his dog and a fax machine to spit out press releases every day, and that's about it. That's probably all these groups consist of. But anyway, you've got these hardcore moralists who are now up in arms about 50 Shades of Grey. The movie trailer came out this week, and they're issuing dire warnings about the dire consequences of screening this yet unscreened movie. We haven't seen it yet, but we know it's just got to be terrible. And let's face it, the students couldn't get a better push if they paid for it. Hey, some of you morality and media people out there, I really need you to protest this program. I can use the publicity. Say something. What can I say? What can I say that would get a bunch of these Westboro types picketing my show? How about this? I have gay friends. Yes. Oh, no. Not all of them are gay, but some of them are gay. I have known gay people. I went and shook hands with a guy who had AIDS. And it happened here in North Dakota. There's no gay people in North Dakota. You want to bet? Now, they're here all right. They're here all right. Look to your right. Look to your left. And look around you. They're out there. They're out there. And they're waiting. Waiting for their moment to come out. Anyway. Oh, winding down here. Like I say, it looks... Oh, the other thing this weekend I wanted to mention, a couple of things going on. Friend of the show, Josie Blaine, has written a new book called Nowhere, Anywhere, about the experiences of her family here in North Dakota over the past century. And it's going to be available on Kindle as of, I believe, noon tomorrow, is it? Well, tomorrow it's going to be available on Kindle. And if you want more information, go to Facebook, the page Josie Blaine, B-L-A-I-N-E, Media. Get more information about that. Also this weekend, some friends of mine who are involved in local theater are putting on Macbeth as part of Shakespeare production over at the Capitol grounds every night through Sunday at 6:30. Admission is free, but bring a lawn chair, or a really good blanket because you don't want to be standing for 2 hours. You want to be sitting. It's a riveting story, and you want to be able to pay all the attention you can. This is one of those days when it's kind of known as having a good problem in my line of work because you got so many things to talk about. And the big problem is deciding what to talk about, what to narrow down. Like a great story here out of New Jersey about a woman who won $20 million playing the Pick Six. And she says she plans to split the jackpot with 19 of her relatives. So that's a little over $1 million per relative, I guess. Well, no, she's splitting it 20 ways, so everybody gets $1 million. Okay. And, of course, the classic question is, would you share lottery winnings with your family? I would be inclined not to share that much. It does lead to a lot of problems, believe me. You think you've had money problems with your family on a smaller scale. Just imagine multiplying it by a couple of $1 million. It's not a good thing. Pat Robertson, of all people, said something very wise one time. He said, you want to have an enemy? Loan them money. You see someone in need, you want to help them, just give them the damn money and forget about it. And don't even think about getting it back. Just give it to them and tell them, pay it forward when you can. That was pretty good advice. And, of course, right after that, he started talking about the tiny little people in the salt shaker who were telling him that the homosexuals were taking over the the British Broadcasting Corporation. I don't know, something bizarre like that. But, it's just like stop clocks are correct twice a day. Every once in a while, a guy like Pat Robertson actually says something that makes a lick of sense. I wish we had more time to talk about this immigration thing. It's not a big topic for me. It's just one of those topics that I don't think makes for very good radio, at least not in a town like this where the nearest national boundary is with Canada. You don't hear a lot of people screaming and yelling about all the Canadians who want to come into the country. But I did notice one thing, and I'll just leave you with this today. You know, the two big things you hear from the anti-immigration group are A, that all these people wanting to come into the country are unskilled, and that B, they want to take all our jobs away. Now think about that. If you're worried about an unskilled laborer taking your job, what the hell does that say about you? Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270. Have a good weekend. Thanks for listening.
ABC News, SuperTalk 1270. Accurate news, stimulating talk. This is KLXX AM, Mandan, Bismarck.